Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Outward, Slate's LGBTQ podcast. That's right, the Trump administration hasn't gotten around to backspacing those letters from our show just yet, though I'm sure they've got their best and brightest on the case. I'm Bryan Louder, an editor at Slate, and since it's been so insanely cold across much of the country the week we're recording, even New Orleans, I hear, got 10 inches of snow. I'm delighted to be able to cuddle up today with both of my cozy co-hosts for a little movie night.
Aww. That's right. 10 inches in New Orleans, that really takes me back. Sorry.
I'm Christina Cauterucci, a senior writer at Slate, and I'm so glad that our own personal, podcast DEI initiative has not been the subject of one of these executive orders yet. But another part of me is like, are we not popular enough?
I know we have most of
Why
the
is no one
LGBTQ on air right now, right? Most of the letters.
Sure, at the rate they're going, I'm sure they'll go to us sometime soon. So I mentioned we're going to talk about a movie. It's one that I've been hearing a lot about, but not necessarily great things. However, we're taping the day after the Oscar nominations were announced, and the Academy, I believe, has forced our hand. Is that right, Christina?
That's right, Bryan. I think we were maybe subconsciously avoiding the topic of Emilia Pérez. So this is the transgender narco musical that came out on Netflix in November, which I think was flying a little bit under the radar for a while, although, plenty of queer people and even LGBTQ advocacy groups were, trashing it. But then it won more Golden Globes than any other film. It was actually the second most nominated film in Golden Globes history. It won Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy at the Globes. And now it got 13 Oscar nominations, which is also more than any other film this year. So it feels like a good moment, or an unavoidable moment for us to not just assess this film and talk about what is so intoxicating to awards voters about it, but also maybe pick apart the discourse that's bubbled up around it. Because it's really, as far as I can tell, kind of one of the most controversial queer films in recent memory. I can't remember one that has been so deeply hated by queer people and deeply loved by awards voters at the same time.
Yeah.
So for those of you who haven't seen it, and fair warning, there will be spoilers ahead, Emilia Pérez comes to us from French writer and director Jacques Audiard, which, by the way, live your life with the audacity of a Jacques Audiard, because here is a guy who doesn't speak Spanish, doesn't like musicals, he has said that, has no real connection to speak of to Mexico or LGBTQ identities. And he makes a Spanish language musical, almost an opera actually, set in Mexico about a drug lord who fakes her own death in order to be able to transition. What a plot line. I mean, honestly, there's potential there. But
the pitch is good.
Yeah, it's certainly unique. The film stars the trans Spanish actress Carla Sofia Gascon in the title role. Zoe Saldana is a lawyer, Rita, who helps her transition. And Selena Gomez plays Emilia's wife, Jessie, who Emilia leaves behind along with their children when she, quote unquote, dies. So this is really a star-studded cast. In addition to featuring a trans woman in a lead role, she just became the first trans person to be nominated for Best Actress. So there's a lot to unpack here, and we'll get right into it after the break. Here's a little tip for all the music fans out there. Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. You heard right, 99%. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back, which means you could earn rewards for those almost front row seats, ride shares to the venue, even that concert merch you've had your eye on since it dropped. If all of that sounds like music to your ears, remember, it pays to discover, based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/credit card.
This episode is brought to you by Companion. Iris and Josh seem like the perfect match, but when a weekend getaway turns into a nightmare, Iris realizes that things aren't as perfect as they appear. From the creators of Barbarian and the studio that brought you The Notebook comes a twisted tale of modern romance and the sweet satisfaction of revenge. Companion, only in theaters January 31st. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
We're back, and we are as ready as we'll ever be to talk about Emilia Pérez. I think I want us to start with just some broad takeaways. Jules, I know you saw a clip first, and you said you didn't think you'd survive watching the whole thing. But here you are. You made it. That must mean you loved it. What did you think?
Oh, of course. I loved it. I voted for it. I'm obviously a big member of the Academy. No, okay, I will say, I think you're right that it's been a while since there has been a film that has kind of bifurcated so strongly between LGBTQ plus viewers and the tastemakers of Hollywood. But I also have to say, if anything was going to push me towards like conspiracy theories about Hollywood, like all of the worst conspiracy theories about Hollywood and the ruling class and all of the weird perverse shit that they're supposedly getting up to, it would be this film. Yeah, because I was introduced to it with a clip of, the now legendary number, I don't even know what it's called, but the one that
vaginoplasty.
Vaginoplastia.
Where we list
yeah. Mrs. Vaginoplastia, Mrs. Penis to Vagina, or vagina to penis. And it takes a lot to offend me. I am a transsexual. Honey, I have had surgeries. I'm going to be having more surgeries. And I have, in the course of my work, in the course of my life, been exposed to the most heinous, most transphobic, most transmisogynist, most sexualized, and most disgusting stuff that men have ever come up with about women like me. And even so, I thought someone had dosed me with acid and like the trip was coming on when I was watching it, because it was both the content and the form at the same time, right? Like on the one hand, I was like, this is the most offensive thing I've ever seen. Somehow, this is the most offensive thing I've ever seen in terms of its depiction, first of all, of Thailand, a beautiful country where beautiful girls go to get incredible vaginas, trust me. And the way that it just sort of depicted apparently what it is to medically transition. But then it was the form that I think felt like a sledgehammer coming down on me, where I was like, why is this the single worst musical number I've ever seen in my life? When Zoe Saldana started singing, I screamed because I thought something had gone wrong. Like I thought the TV was malfunctioning. Yeah. And that's just the general feeling I get with this film. And I've appreciated that part of the reviews because, I'm not a representation queen, right? Frankly, I don't care if trans people be getting nominated for Oscars and stuff. Like, this is not important. And I think there's something a little politically calculated about the way that like trans politics is being very Hollywoodized right now in order to distract from what what the girls really need, which is not films, misrepresenting them or representing them well. But then the thing I really appreciate about a lot of the critical reception is it's just a horrifically bad film as a film. Like as a work of cinema, it is bizarre. It is broken. At first I was like, I think I want to lead into this conversation today saying like, this is exactly the film that our liberal politics of inclusion would create. And in some ways, it is the film that liberals want and also the one that we all deserve because we're so screwed right now. But I actually think it's more just about like whatever is going on with filmmaking and producing and technology, like what's going on? That French director's Odyssey, his little pet project, I think just tells us a lot about we are out to lunch. We're just out to lunch these days.
Jules, I want to just play a little clip of this incredible song. So I think it's gotten sort of mixed critical reviews. Some people have really loved it, but then there's been a lot of people, including Jack Hamilton, who wrote a great piece on Slate, pointing out that it doesn't live up to what you want a musical to be, even just in terms of the genre. I mean, in the best musicals, you want the songs to be like the emotion is overflowing the script. And the songs like heighten the feeling and the emotion. And in this, it felt like it really kind of stilted it. In large part because, with the exception, I guess, of Selena Gomez, the people can't really sing, nor can they dance.
No.
And, at the end of the film, I couldn't even remember a single song from it. There was no earworm. There was nothing that lifted the spirit or brought me into the depths of despair. The only song I could remember was the vaginoplasty one because it's
so absurd.
It like tunneled deep into my brain almost in like a fight or flight kind of a way.
Yeah. I think Christina, I think part of the reason that you can't remember, like, I think that's such a good point that you can't remember any of the songs is because there was no unifying aesthetic to this at all. Like it was, each song was a completely different genre, and some of them were like offensively done. It was like raps and things that should not have been there in this way. And you're left with like no sense of like what this, like as a sort of work of art, if we can call it that, or like an opera maybe is what he was trying to go for. Like there is nothing that ties it together to leave you with that sense. Definitely on the formal level that you were talking about, Jules, like it's just bad. Like it doesn't hold together. So that's like one thing before you even get into the questions of like representation and the rest of it.
It's interesting because one of the criticisms of the film has been that it views like it was sprung entirely from the cisgender imagination. And sure enough, I mean, it's almost uncanny how it hits like every trope that people have been criticizing for decades now. It's like tiring to list them out, but like the hyper fascination with the medical transition, the likening of transition to dying, the suggestion that trans people are inherently frauds and that they're lying to everyone around them. Like there's this Mrs. Doubtfire kind of element to the film where she, decides Emilia Pérez decides she can't actually leave her children behind. She wants to spend time with them. And so she pretends to be, they think she's died, but she pretends to be this long lost cousin in order to convince them to move into, her villa outside Mexico City.
Which creates like a really menacing situation. Like,
absolutely.
It's very strange that particular dynamic is so weird because it's like she seems threatening to them, and like the relationship with Yessie, like it is also strange. Like so that choice is one of many things in this that like was anti-trans, like in effect, I think.
Yeah. The thing is, like, Carla Sofia Gascon actually had a large hand in changing the script from what it initially was. Apparently, it was initially much worse. It was a lot more of a comedy, apparently. And so Jacques Audiard based this on a story from a chapter in a novel, Écoute, by Boris Raison. I'm doing a great job with all of these names. Please don't judge my accent. The original story was that Manitas del Monte, who was that was the name of the, drug, I guess, queen pin before her transition.
Queen.
And she initially wanted to transition primarily to escape prosecution for her cartel-related crimes, and then gradually grew into her identity as a woman. And Carla Gascon came in and was like, what if we actually showed like the gender dysphoria part and made this person trans for self-actualization reasons and not just self-protection reasons? And Jacques Audiard was like, whoa, yeah, like, yes, that's amazing. Let's do that instead. There were a couple other parts too that Carla Sofia Gascon was like, can we actually make this a little more true to life or, more sensitive to the trans experience? But, and, I think there's I sense or I imagine that there are a lot of people involved in this film who have sort of absolved themselves of any responsibility of like taking a critical eye on their own work by saying like, well, this trans woman says it's okay, and she's getting lauded for this film. And so it must be okay, right? Like, or if they had any reservations or, to get Zoe Saldana and Selena Gomez to sign on, I'm sure they were like, wow, yeah, because the big call for the past decade and a half has been stop having cis men play trans women and stop having cis women play trans men. And they're like, well, we did that, at least there's a trans woman playing a trans woman in this. But it just goes to show, I feel like there's kind of like a tyranny of low expectations involved here, where did she deserve to be nominated for Best Actress? Like, no. I don't know. Did Nicole Kidman? Also no. But like, actually, I don't know if Nicole Kidman, but she, I think, won the Golden Globe. Anyway, did she deserve to be nominated for Best Actress? Like, I don't think so. But this gets to the awards part of it, which is that I think people want to be in a position to feel like they're a part of progress being made. And making this film and then awarding this film is one way to give them that sense.
Oh, 100%. This is all about hand washing. I'm sorry, put on your tinfoil hats, but it is about corporate hand washing. It's very 2025, right? It's like, oh, well, the Academy really applauded this horrific botch of a film. And so, at least we know what side Hollywood is on, which just first of all, plays right into the hands of the MAGA movement. But anyways, I just think this is exactly the fulfillment of the hollowness of all this representation and visibility politics that, like, let's be real. Sure, if you become a celebrity or trying to make it as an actor, you have to internalize it. It probably starts to change you over time. I don't know. I don't have to live that life. I'm very grateful for it. And it's very obvious to me, that corporations that have financial interests, will make their decisions accordingly. And they went in pretty whole hog on this representation matters thing. And so I don't blame any of the actors for this, but it just seems to me like even the defense of the film, right, around Gascon having to come in and like improve it, basically to liberalize it, right, to make it a story about self-actualization and self-affirmation. And I think actually just proves how stupid those liberal rubrics of trans inclusion actually are. Like, I agree with other people who've written about this film. It does not have a message. It's not coherent enough to have a message. And not that every film has to have a message, but if you're going to have like a film that's supposed to be, signaling something about progress or representation, obviously it's going to be interpreted as having a message about that one way or the other. And I think basically like the improvements to the film are actually, the most offensive part about it to me, because if there's any takeaway from the film, it's what, right? It's like, well, she might have been an evil, bad drug cartel, but transitioning actually kind of made her a better person. And that's the thing I fucking resent the most. But you don't have to become a better person by transitioning. You should just get to do it. Okay? Like, period. End of sentence. And that's the narrative that I find so offensive. And I think that's, if I have to imagine, beyond the just empty hollowness, and these people be voting in the Academy, they don't watch any of it, right? They're not watching the movies. Beyond the just sheer emptiness of, I want to feel a little good. I want to feel a little good about who got nominated this year. Feel like I did something good in 2025. Beyond that, I think it really is this like laziness of like, oh, well, in my heart, I know it's okay for people to transition because look, it makes them into better people. And it's like, no, darling, that's actually one of the most horrific judgments. That's the cisgender imagination, right? Is that like, ew, you were kind of gross and bad and you did bad things before. And maybe that part is still in you somewhere, that male part.
That was the man part.
The man
and
part.
That's very much the way that Jacques Audiard has talked about this is very much like, I really wanted the conflict between like the masculine and the violence and then like the feminine and I'm like, that's not a real dichotomy, you know?
Well, it is to French directors.
But also, so they've pushed back against this criticism by saying like, well, look, Emilia Pérez at the end of the film, she does, she like gets violent against Jesse when she finds out that Jesse is gonna like marry someone else. She like kills people again, and so actually the moral is she didn't change.
Right.
But I think that if so many people are watching this film thinking that your message was, oh look, her transition was like an absolution for all of the terrible things she did before, and in fact motivated her to then launch this like weird nonprofit, to help
so insulting,
to help the victims of cartel violence find closure. Then like maybe you didn't do a good job writing the whole rest of the film if that's people's takeaway and that's not what you meant.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to pick up on that you mentioned a little bit ago, Christina, was about the representation or presentation of the main character at the beginning before she transitions. It's this very terrifying, kind of like monstrous almost sort of representation of the drug kingpin and
Queenpin.
Excuse
actually,
me, sorry, Queenpin.
It's been updated in Webster's dictionary.
But literally, like, to me, scary. Like, it was sort of like he's always in shadow. He has this very, very gruff kind of almost like subvocal voice thing going on. Of course, he's very violent, as a drug queenpin would be. And then, then that's meant to, of course, like, once the transition happens, be that much more of a distinction, right, between the two parts of this person as the movie presents it. But what it does to me, and I think this also pops up in other parts, especially at the beginning of the movie, is it creates this almost like horror or body horror thing that's going on. I don't know if y'all notice this, but like, there's a sense of like, shock at the procedures. Like there's a part where Emilia opens her shirt to show that she's been on hormones for a time, and it's sort of done in this like almost like jump scare kind of way. I thought that was just I think what that speaks to, I guess, is the sort of cisgender like view that the movie has. But it's such a strange thing to watch because obviously, the film is trying to present us with this sort of story of ennobling and whatever, but instead it comes off as sort of horror, right?
Totally.
It really, that not to go back to the vaginoplasty song again, but the depiction, they're like, wheeling people around on stretchers, these like smiling people beneath their facial casts, kind of wheeling them around in like, synchronized swimming type formations. I don't know what else to call that. But this like elaborate, hospital choreography, and really makes it seem like, these people are on an assembly line, and transition is this kind of one-stop shop, and there's a before and an after, and transition is this just sort of like event. And that whole scene in the hospital and the scene you're talking about, Bryan, really felt to me like it came out of the MAGA imagination and not just the cisgender imagination, that there's this idea that everything is like fakeified and manufactured in not a good way, because I think those things, manufactured doesn't have to mean bad, but like I think they play it in a very voyeuristic and kind of alienating way, and not like, there's like a set of individual people who are in this hospital having a variety of procedures at like various points in their whatever medical transition, but more like it's this sort of magical moment that happens when you go in, you're one person, and when you come out, you're another.
Can I swoop in with kind of a bigger hot take here?
Always.
It's not so much about the film as what the film reveals, but I think this is one of the problems. I totally agree with everything that you both are saying. I think that this has something to do with the problem, again, of this project of trans inclusion that we've been floundering on, and the way that, MAGA has seized on it, right? I think one of the unfortunate things about the far right is it's actually quite honest about how it feels all the time, right? And one way to be really simple about like the repulsion, that the disgust that animates part of. It's not the reason for anti-trans politics, but it's part of what like makes things cohere, right? Assembles a political coalition of people who otherwise might not, get together and vote Republican, is an honesty about that, right? They're like, I can't understand. Why would you do that to your body? And the liberal position, which I find so frankly ridiculous and stupid and unhelpful, has all been about, no, we need to be able to relate to you, right? And like one of the little slogans I've seen kind of on the rise in the last year or two that I actually, I've said it before, but I actually have some real reservations about, is the one where people are like, well, cis people get gender affirming care too. Did you know they get the hormones in the surgery, honey? And it's like, yeah, sure, you get the same things, but absolutely, and they should be equally easy to get and free for everyone, but that doesn't mean they're the same, right? And it's like that problem that you're both identifying in the film, where the body horror and also the absurdity is the transition part and not the dysphoria, that gets life exactly backwards. Like, honey, I can tell you, gender dysphoria is body horror. You can literally wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and be like, I want to let out a blood-curdling scream. This is absolutely irrational that my body would look like this. I do not understand how I could possibly exist in the world. And then when you go and you get the surgery, it is not shocking. It is a surgery, right? But it's not this like, oh my God, right? There is no moment of exposing the breasts and being shocked. Like, no, all that stuff feels so incredibly powerfully neurobiologically correct that somehow in the magic of being a person, your brain goes back and revises your whole little life, and actually you can't remember when you had the horrifying right? So it's literally like exactly the opposite of what this film, but I'm so tired of that. I think it used to be this kind of perverted male gaze kind of thing, and I'm sure the French director has a little bit of that cultural inheritance, but I really do think it is this weird trans inclusion thing where it's like it has to be relatable, right? Oh well, women go in, get plastic surgery, yes, but it's not exactly the same, darling. And like, let's not pretend, because I just think that serves really bizarre, dishonest ends, right? So it's sort of about like moving around that disgust. And I think one thing that a lot of non-trans people don't want to admit right now is, even if they're good liberals and they're very supportive, I think this comes up a lot with the kids. I'm like, yo, you really don't. If you think for 1 second about a 17-year-old getting a genital surgery, honey, your head's going to explode and you are going to vote Republican. So like, we got to be a little bit more honest about that. And I think these films then end up becoming like these like weird containers for all of these feelings, and they show up and they just make for really bad cinema. That's the true crime.
Yeah, it's I love that you're talking about this, Jules, because obviously there have been a lot of sort of slogans or frameworks that seemed expedient in the moment that then turned out to be like not actually accurate. Just like I'm thinking of
Born This Way, right?
Born This Way. Like Born in the Wrong Body. Also, a lot of people have been like,
I love
can we
that
like
one,
stop
though.
saying that? And it feels like a little bit of progress in a way to then get to look back and be like, that what we should stop saying that, you know what I mean? Or like, that's not actually helpful. But there is, and not just in, trans politics, but such a determination to analogize one group's experience with another's, to be like, well, surely you'll have empathy if you can personally relate to this. Or, it's like everyone has had an abortion. Not everyone has had an abortion. Everyone knows someone who's had an abortion. Or like, I'm the father of daughters. Or like, what would you do if it was like, this is like the Holocaust? Like, it's where we should be able to expand our minds enough to be like, wow, I do not get that at all. Or like, I've not been in that position, but like,
exactly.
you should also just
respect
be
that
able
people
to
are going to get abortion.
Treated with dignity and respect. All right, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the backlash to the backlash.
If you like mythology, folklore, and urban legends, I have a great podcast for you.
Spirits is a boozy dive into everything from ancient Greek mythology to modern stories about the occult,
where my BFF Julia and I pour a drink and learn a new story from somewhere around the world every week.
We look at all these stories from the lens of feminism, queerness, and modern adulthood.
And as big nerds, we also go behind books, movies, and television shows and the mythologies behind them.
Best part is you can dive in with any of the over 400 episodes we've published.
Subscribe to Spirits now in your podcast app or go to spiritspodcast.com.
Hi, it's Willa Paskin, the host of Slate's Decoder Ring, a show about cracking cultural mysteries. Our new episode is all about the swing revival of the 1990s, when Americans seemed all at once to become completely obsessed with swing dancing and, fedora hats. I always thought the whole thing was hopelessly corny, but I've learned it's a lot more than that, too. For this episode, we talked to everyone who was anyone in the swing scene, from Big Bad Voodoo Daddy to the dancers in the infamous Gap khakis commercial. It turns out this particular fad is more complicated and interesting than I ever imagined. So, how did 90s swing music, of all things, become cool and then uncool so quickly? Find out on the latest episode of Slate's Decoder Ring podcast, wherever you listen.
All right, Ouroboros time. We're now seeing some queer criticism of the queer criticism of this film. So
I love the internet.
I know, it's beautiful.
It's so good for us.
In Out, the trans critic May Rude has written multiple pieces defending Emilia Pérez against, every possible argument that it's transphobic or trans inadequate, I guess. Carla Sofia Gascon has obviously weighed in kind of a typical celebrity manner to be like, you're just an armchair critic. She also said, being LGBT doesn't make you less of an idiot, which, embroidered out on a pillow.
Well, I know that's right,
right.
Honey.
I'm kind of like, yeah,
Thanks
that's the
for
whole
proving the rule.
What we're talking about right now about your involvement in this film. Jeremy O. Harris, the writer of Slave Play and kind of a bomb thrower in cultural discourse, he responded on Instagram to a piece in them.us that was titled, Emilia Pérez is bad, actually, why does awards season love it? So Jeremy O. Harris comes in and he's talking about the awards season of it all, and he wrote, awards are not really useful for anything except giving people more opportunities to work, and I think in a season where so few women of color and queer people are getting that chance, we should be mindful of the lives affected for the worse with clickbait bullshit headlines like this. The EDI departments are leaving. He meant DEI. There won't be too much soon in the way of Black, brown, queer, trans media if we don't protect each other. This is something that I think we've come back to quite a bit on this podcast, this idea. Actually, in our initial brief when we started the podcast, Bryan, I think we were very much reacting to this, to be like, actually, a lot of queer media at the time did feel like it was kind of cheerleading for every queer cultural product.
Right, and circling the wagons around, right, or whatever we had produced. Yeah.
And so, what do you make of this kind of intra-community criticism of the criticism? Where's it coming from?
It's people's professional interests. Come on, it's all self-interested. Yeah. I just think it's so silly. You've got to protect this vital representation. Okay, I won't even attribute these quotes, but it's a problem with identity politics and the way identity politics have been merged with both corporate culture and people's value in their careers. And now we're supposed to go out on a limb to save people's identities and completely ignore other differences. Not all trans women, not even all trans women of color are equivalent, right? There are, for example, there's a thing called class difference. There's a thing called what age did you transition at, honey? And it's I will say someone who I really admire, who's a real one, okay, who's been around for a long time, who transitioned young, who paid her dues, who has worked hard to get into acting, was responding to some of the quotes that Gascon had put out. Something to the effect of like, if you don't like this film, why don't you just go make your own film? And, she was like, honey, you don't think trans women are out here fucking hustling, trying to get their projects funded? You don't think they're out there doing that? You think we're just, oh no, we're just sitting at home.
Wait, who is this? Who was saying
like,
that?
It's so ridiculous that, kind of called out like, hey,
good for her.
It was Trace Lysette, and I think she was spot on. And she pointed out, and I think this is totally valid, it's a class difference. There's a class difference historically between trans women who wait a very long time to transition, and they're able to get educations, get into a career. They are able to work often as men for quite a long time. It doesn't mean that they weren't really women the whole time, but it does mean they have acquired certain material advantages and accumulations over time. And then they transition when they have enough security that they're not going to lose everything and risk everything, like the girls who transitioned young and often have to make it without any supports on their own, rely on one another, come up through the streets or the stroll. And that's a huge disparity. And which ones are the ones who are getting to make projects, get things greenlit, are winning awards, and then are turning around and, complaining at the working class girls being like, I don't like this, not just because it doesn't represent me. I don't want this kind of stuff being made, right? Like, sorry, I don't want to get up. I'm not going to get up and go defend this film. I just think that's really ridiculous. And I think it's very telling that the people who want to come to the defense of the film are all people in the industry. Like, of course, that makes sense. That's actually very rational for you to come and defend your career and the thing that pays your bills. But don't pretend that identity is this great equalize. Oh, we're all LGBT, so we can all be in this conversation on the same plane, or even amongst trans women or trans women of color. Like, there are real differences. And I think that that's something that I just find, it's like you have to suspend all of that to enter into the terrain of defense, I don't know, of this kind of like Ouroboros of criticism.
I just feel like we don't talk about that enough, the actual real differences between people who share certain common identities. And one thing that I was thinking about with this film and the idea that we have to defend it is, what are you defending?
Exactly.
Because this first of all, this film, people are always like, show more realistic depictions of trans people. This didn't even make any pretense of having a realistic depiction because it's such an outlandish story to begin with. And so it almost doesn't even need to engage with that criticism. And I'm fine with this not being a realistic depiction of trans people because it's, again, like, how many trans drug queenpins are there who, like, they're at the top of their game in, like, the drug world and then turn into, like, a nationally beloved celebrity in the NGO circuit? Like, what? That's just not a real story. And so this obviously doesn't represent any real trans person's life. So, like, whatever. But it's like, what does this film do? What do you think this film is doing for trans people that you think it's so important that we really, what Jeremy O'Hara's, the argument he's making is that we need to protect it because of the good it's doing for Carla Sofia Gascon. And maybe like the one or two other trans actresses whom somebody might make a film starring them in the next 2 years. Like, it's just such a small number of people, trans people, who are benefiting from this, that is it worth kind of, again, degrading the cultural expectations of queer and trans art? And, at this point, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, or a theme we keep coming back to is like, what are good representations even doing? Like, whose mind is going to be changed at this point in our polarized national political climate and the totally degraded sort of media and news climate? Who is going to watch a film starring a trans person that does a good job and have their mind changed about it? Like, we're not at that point anymore. I also think maybe I'm a little spoiled now, where there actually has been some good trans artwork that's like made it big, and some trans artists and actors like Trace Lysette who have like really blown up in a little bit of a mainstream way, where we actually don't need kind of random trans stories to be like, well, this is going to be America's first introduction to a trans woman, so we have to support it because otherwise they're going to be thinking of them as somebody that they don't even know.
Yeah, we're definitely past that point. I do want to make room here, though, in terms of the question of like, why are some people defending this or liking it? It does seem that there is a contingent of people who maybe are more hardcore musical buffs than like I or we are, who do love it for that. Like love.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's like, it's interestingly, my partner.
But how did they listen to the music?
I know. Listen, but my partner Cam watched it last night to prepare for this taping, and he posted something on Instagram about how terrible it was, and just like, oh, god awful. Like, how could you do it? And he has gotten a lot of pushback from people who I know to be relatively informed about these things, who really think it's like an excellent film. So that is, just one thing to keep in mind, that not everybody thinks it's terrible on aesthetic grounds, even though it definitely is.
If you're one of those people, listeners, or if you have any other thoughts of the film, we would love to hear what you thought about it and whether you think it's going to be the crash of 2025, which is an analogy I've heard some people making. You can reach us at outwardpodcast@slate.com, day or night.
All right, that is it for the main show today, but there's always more Outward over in the Slate Plus feed. This week, we've got a fresh round of Pride and Provocations for you. If you're not already a subscriber, remember that by joining Slate Plus, you'll get ad-free podcasts, extra segments on all of our shows, and you'll never hit a paywall on the Slate site. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of the Outward show page, or you can visit slate.com/outwardplus to get access wherever you listen. Other than that, please send us feedback and topic ideas at outwardpodcast@slate.com. Our show is produced by our podcast queen pen, Palace Shaw. If you like Outward, please subscribe in your podcast app, tell your friends about it, rate and review, and bring everyone over to the show so we can all enjoy it together. Until next time, stay gay, everybody.
Stay gay.
Attention repeat snoozers. Set your alarm for the oddly specific sleep problem sale. We have just the right mattress for you with a 1-year price guarantee. So where would you look to find the perfect mattress? In a little mattress store or mattress warehouse? Visit mattresswarehouse.com.